Sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my streaming video service, Nebula, when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description. Is Apple evil? Yes, of course, 100%. But in a far more dangerous way than the cliched, cartoonish, contorted new evilist article in Slate suggests. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. Slate says that, sure, Amazon is a bully and a tax cheat, Facebook is a bad employer, and Google is a haven for sexual harassers and abusers. But Apple, according to Slate, is one of the most egregious offenders and yet has been, curiously, forgiven for their evil. Apple has gotten away with it all. So what's worse than bullying and cheating and being bad to employees and providing a haven for sexual harassers and abusers in Slate's book? What crime does Slate think we've failed to hold Apple accountable for? Why, purveying crystal prisons, of course. No, seriously, that's what they printed, right there. But let's back up a bit. Slate starts off by retreading the tiredest of cliches right in the title, the cult of Apple. Because Apple customers are a cult, Apple, unlike every other big tech company, just isn't held accountable for their evil. So, sure, there are some people who have way too much brand affinity for Apple. People who'll keep their butterfly keyboards out of spite, or spit because the E key doesn't work, and stick to iOS 13.0 forever, just to prove it's not as buggy as the naysayers say. But that's hardly unique to Apple. We have people who refuse to give back Galaxy Notes that were literally exploding, and granola-crunching hippies who'll defend Google's most proprietary, predatory software moves just because the stuff that doesn't make them money is free and open-sourced. The cult of Apple is so 20 years ago, though. The problem now is the cult of everything, and it's a big problem. To our detriment, do we mistake companies for our tribes or take criticisms against brands as existential threats to our own identities? Companies are just that. Companies, and we don't need to be loyal to them. They need to be loyal to us. And when they're not, we need to vote with our wallets until they are again. Also, the idea that Apple isn't held to the absolute highest level of scrutiny in the industry is prima facie absurd. Every controversy involving Apple, real and imagined, is plastered across the internet on a daily basis. Even controversies not involving Apple somehow find a way to cram Apple into the headline. And the reason for that is simple. Apple gets clicks. Put Apple in a title and it'll get exponentially more clicks. If there are 50 companies involved in a controversy, you can bet your bottom Bitcoin Apple will be one of the few or only companies listed in the head and the lead. Which company did Ricky Gervais just take a shot at recently in the Golden Globes? Apple, of course. Because, of course, Apple. Slate's first direct charge is that Apple is evil because they use the App Store to control what software can and can't run on your device, based on capricious and political grounds. In terms of control, that's certainly true on iOS, but not true on macOS, at least not yet. You can still choose to install apps from anywhere on the Mac, if you want, including the naked web. On iOS, capriciousness is absolutely a problem, and a critical one in my opinion, that Apple has just never successfully addressed. Not because of politics or some types of apps are never approved, like porn. Very few people would argue that there shouldn't be any line at all, ever. But many people will argue where exactly that line should be, and that's an important argument to have, continuously. No, the capriciousness that I think is a problem is more a lack of consistency built into the process, where an innocuous to acclaimed app can be approved 9 times and then rejected the 10th. That's what creates learned helplessness. That's what creates a chilling effect, and ultimately what brings negative attention and maybe regulation to the entire process. An argument could be made that Apple controlling the App Store makes the iPhone and iPad safer, which increases customer trust, especially for families and children, which increases value for developers and prevents litigation and preserves reputation and profits for Apple. A counter-argument could also be made that implementing the same system as the Mac, App Store only by default, but gatekeeper for signed apps, even a Konami code to enable sideloading from any source would cost some security, sure, but would also enable way more flexibility, and maybe even competition. Both are totally legitimate arguments to make and lead to an important debate we absolutely should be having, but evil plays no part in any of it. Slate then says the reason for Apple's App Store control is, of course, money, to get 30% of every app sold. And to gin up the feels, they say that cost gets passed on to us, the customer, as if Apple suddenly invented the concept of gross versus net profits. Now, Apple did, I believe, actually pioneer the agency model for apps, which is the term for that 30-70 split here. Before that, a plethora of app-selling fiefdoms on the web typically took a lot higher cut. Hell, the classic wholesale split for boxed software on a shelf was 55%. Google takes 30% for the Play Store as well. Google even takes 30% of membership fees and contributions on YouTube. It's become a standard. And sure, technically, you can use alternate stores on Android, but as we've seen from the recent ban on Huawei in the US, trying to sell an Android phone without access to Google Play services is a showstopper in many major markets. Also, free apps are still free. Apple takes no cut of those, even those that are just front ends for billion-dollar services companies. Again, there's an argument to be made that that was then and this is now. That back in 2008, app stores needed unification and needed to build customer trust, and 30% was a fair and fine cut to take to provide that. Also, that no store can support multiple levels of aggregation. Spotify aggregates a bunch of music and takes a cut. Apple aggregates a bunch of apps and takes a cut. There's just not enough of a cut for both Apple and Spotify to take at the same time. So each expects and argues that the other should give up or add on their cut. It's complicated. You could also argue times change, and maybe the market is so mature now that the whole agency model and aggregation model needs to be reconsidered. We complained about cable bundling for a decade, but now we have a plethora of content streaming fiefdoms, and we're complaining about the fragmented experience and the costs again. But so it goes. All of these are valid arguments and important debates, and all of them have zero evil involved. Slate then talks about the right to repair, which I've done a few videos on already, and I'll link to them in the descriptions. Basically, that Apple has extended its controlling software nature to hardware, and now makes devices that refuse to work if they determine that Apple customers have had the temerity to use suppliers and services centers of their own choosing, rather than Apple's official service depots. You can absolutely make an argument that Apple is trying to keep all repair business and profits to themselves. It's an argument a lot of companies that want to profit off repairs themselves, especially in bulk, make all the time. You can also argue that Apple is less worried about losing repair revenue than they are losing lawsuits around faulty repairs where bad batteries cause fires and bad technicians steal private data. Regardless, it's fairly clear that no amount of Apple stores will soon be able to handle all the repairs on all the devices that are going to be active in the coming years, which is probably why Apple has begun creating third-party repair programs, and absolutely needs to keep expanding on them more and better. Slate also misstates Apple warning to shareholders that future profits were seriously endangered by Apple customers electing to use their devices for longer. What Apple actually did was inform shareholders that the deeply discounted battery replacement program they had was going to impact profits during the duration of that program. But before and after, Apple also announced several initiatives, hardware and software, precisely to make devices last longer for customers, from performance enhancements to processors with years of overhead to updates for generations. Because that also happens to be good for Apple. The longer devices stay on the market, the more devices are on the market. The more people will eventually upgrade to new devices, and the more services and accessories Apple can sell to people with all those devices. Forget evil. That's just good economics. Slate also somehow blames Apple for John Deere licensing instead of selling tractors to farmers, because I guess they somehow forgot to blame Apple for printer ink scams and Hollywood content licensing as well. Slate does go after Apple's record in China, which totally valid. And I've also recently done a whole video on that, and I'll link to it in the description. The argument for Apple in China is that engagement is the only effective way to facilitate change. The argument against it is that engagement can often become appeasement, even support. There's also an argument to be made that Apple has to follow local laws, but an argument that there will be laws that are absolutely immoral to follow, and there has to be a line made and never crossed. And yeah, that's easy in the case of China. But in the US, Australia, France, and other countries, there are pressure for access and data repatriation. And just because it's easier to point fingers at others doesn't mean we don't have to pay careful attention to ourselves as well. Slate dives back into the cliches with if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, but says that when it comes to Apple, even if you're paying for the product, you're still the product, sold to app programmers as a captive market, or gouged on parts and services by official Apple depots. Which isn't really backed up in any way, since I have an Android phone and I still pay Netflix regardless of which platform or device I'm using, and I literally can't pay for things like Procreate or Pixelmator on non-Apple platforms because it turns out developers still get to choose which ones they prefer to support. And that's my problem with the entire article in general. It takes issues that can and should be the subject of serious debate and distorts and deforms them to the point where they're easily dismissed by anyone with even a passing familiarity with logic and basic understanding of media literacy. The article ends by saying that Google isn't your friend, and neither is Facebook, nor Twitter, nor Airbnb, and neither is Apple. And that part I totally agree with. Like I said, we shouldn't be thoughtlessly supporting any companies. They should be thoughtfully supporting us. And as to whether or not Apple is evil, it's not the mustache-twirling, caped supervillain, devil-horned, capital E evil that we should be worried about. That's what this article is trying to do, sadly. And while it'll get a ton of attention, including this, it'll get just as many eye rolls, including this, and be easily dismissed for its inaccuracies and its choice to put agenda over information. And honestly, readers deserve better, much better, and we won't get it unless we hold coverage as accountable as we hold the subjects of that coverage. Which brings me to the small e evil, the one that chips away at us day by day, policy by policy, and the one that should scare the hell out of us. For years and years now, I've been riffing on Arthur C. Clarke, who said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I firmly believe that any sufficiently large company is indistinguishable from evil. The bigger the company gets, the broader their customer base becomes, the greater the chance something they do goes against the interests of some segment of those customers. Likewise suppliers, likewise regulators, likewise any stakeholders. For example, Apple amping up security on macOS is good for their increasingly large mainstream user base, but it's been super annoying, really an inconvenience for their traditional pro market. So absolutely, treat Apple as lowercase evil, scrutinize everything they do, weigh your interests against the collective interests, listen to arguments for and against, become informed, then speak out about everything that concerns you, constantly. Which is another important discussion to have at a level of nuance just utterly obliterated by articles like Slate, where all they seem to care about is the headline and cramming whatever narrative they can behind it. But that's how a lot of the internet works these days, based on manufacturing sensationalism and monetizing outrage. And it's one of the reasons we're making Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform I'm building with a group of other education-y creators like H. Bomber Guy, Thomas Frank, Sarah Z, Second Thought, Low Spec Gamer, Polyphonic, City is Beautiful, and many more. We're building it because we want a place where creators can try out new content ideas that might not work on YouTube, or simply for people who don't want to watch on YouTube. And because it now comes bundled with CuriosityStream, which is just $19.99 a year, for the whole year, you also get access to thousands of documentaries and series like Digits, Vint Cerf, Steve Case, and Ed Snowden, where internet insiders reveal the hidden past and startling present of the internet. By signing up, you won't just be helping me out, but the entire educational community, as we work together to build a place where we can create the content you really want us to create. Just go to curiositystream.com/vector for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. And now, Nebula as well. And enter promo code VECTOR to start your membership completely free for the first 31 days. Thanks, CuriosityStream, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. So, that's what I think. But now I want to hear from you. Hit like if you do, subscribe if you haven't already, cult up that bell gizmo so YouTube will actually tell you when new videos go live, and then hit up the comments and let me know. Thanks for watching, and see you next video.